Welcome to the Taryn Reeves Show, the podcast for elite entrepreneurs, visionary leaders, and high-impact CEOs who are ready to grow their brand, amplify their message, and build a legacy. I'm your host, Taryn Reeves, multiple international best-selling author, publishing strategist, and founder of Automatic Authority Publishing and Press House. Each week, we dive into powerful conversations with trailblazing entrepreneurs and changemakers who are using storytelling to scale their business and impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for a dose of inspiration, strategy, and the truth behind what it really takes to turn your wisdom into wealth. Today, we've got a solo episode, and we are talking about something that will fundamentally shift the way you think about selling, positioning, and client attraction. Let me tell you about the moment that changed pretty much everything for me. So a few years ago, I was on a sales call with a potential client, as we all get to at some stage. She was a brilliant founder who had built something genuinely valuable. She needed help turning her expertise into a book, into authority, into something that would open doors for her business. And I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I walked her through the process. I explained the benefits. I listed the outcomes. I even threw in some social proof, other clients, their results, the whole thing. She said, "That sounds great. Let me think about it." And we all know what that means when we hear this on a sales call, right? I ended the Zoom and I sat there and I was really frustrated, not at her, at myself, because I knew what I offered was transformational. I know that this stuff works, but I also knew that I had just spent 45 minutes on that call convincing this lady instead of connecting with her. So after coming to this realization, aha moment, I changed one thing and really kind of one sentence. So the next sales call I had, I didn't start with the process. I didn't start with the benefits. I started with a story. I told my next potential client about another client who came to me, burned out, invisible in her industry, and convinced that no one cared what she had to say. And how 6 months later, she was being quoted in Forbes, invited to speak at industry events, and closing clients who used to ignore her because she finally had a platform that matched her expertise. That client signed on the spot on that call. Not because I convinced her, but because she saw herself in that story. And that's what we're talking about today. How to use storytelling to sell without actually selling. How to stop exhausting yourself trying to convince people and start attracting the right people who are already ready to say yes to you. So here's the truth. Hard selling feels gross because it is gross. And in 2026, it doesn't even work. Think about the last time someone tried to sell you something by listing features and benefits. How did it feel? Probably like you were being talked at, not to, like a real human. Like you were a transaction, not a person. Now, think about the last time someone told you a story that made you feel something. And you found yourself thinking, yep, I need that. Therein lies the difference, my friend. The problem with traditional selling is that it's built on logic. It assumes that if you just explain your offer well enough, people will buy it. But that's not how humans make decisions. We don't buy based on logic. We buy based on emotion, and then we justify it with logic later. So when you lead with features, benefits, and outcomes, you're asking people to do the hard work of imagining how your offer fits into their life. And most people won't do that. They're too busy, they're too overwhelmed, they're too skeptical. But when you tell a story, you do that work for them. You show them the transformation. You let them see themselves in the outcome. You make it real. And here's the thing. The most successful entrepreneurs in the world don't pitch, they share narratives. Oprah doesn't sell you on her book club by listing the benefits of reading, does she? She tells you about the book that changed her life, and suddenly you want to read it too. Richard Branson, he doesn't sell you on Virgin by talking about customer service metrics. He tells you stories about adventure, risk, and building something that matters. And Steve Jobs didn't sell you on the iPhone by listing specs. He told you a story about a device that would change your life. And he was right. Storytelling isn't a nice-to-have skill. It is the single most profitable skill you can learn in 2026. Because when you master storytelling, you stop chasing clients and you start attracting them. So this is all well and good, right? But how do you actually do this? How do you turn a story into a sale without feeling like you're manipulating people? The framework that I use and I teach my clients is called the Epiphany Bridge. It's a concept popularized by Russell Brunson, but I've adapted it for the kind of entrepreneurs that I work with, established founders who are building authority, not just revenue. Here's how it works. It has 5 steps. Step 1 is the backstory. Step 2 is the wall. Step 3 is the epiphany. Step 4 is the plan. And step 5, your result. Let's go into each of these. Step 1, the backstory. Start by setting the scene. Where were you or your client before the transformation? What was the struggle? What was the pain? This is where your audience sees themselves. They think, that's me. I've been there. Here's an example. I used to spend hours on sales calls trying to convince people why they needed to work with me. I'd walk them through every detail, every benefit, every outcome. And most of the time, they'd say they needed to think about it. Right? Do you see how that is where I was? What was the struggle? What was the pain? Then we move into step 2, which is the wall. This is the moment of realization. It's the turning point and the thing that made you or your client realize that something had to change. Here's the example. I realized I was exhausted, not just from the calls, but from the constant convincing. I was trying to logic people into buying and it wasn't working. I knew there had to be a better way. Okay. Now we're moving through step 3, which is the epiphany stage, the breakthrough, the new belief, the shift in perspective that changed everything. So then we go something like, that's when I realized people don't buy because they understand your process. They buy because they see themselves in your story. They buy because they believe that transformation is possible for them too. Now we show them the path. Step 4, the plan. What did you or your client do differently? What was the new strategy, framework, or approach? Here's the example. So I stopped leading with features. I started leading with stories. I'd share a client's journey, the struggle, the shift, the outcome. And suddenly people weren't asking for time to think. They were asking how to get started. Now we're moving to the final part, which is the result, the transformation, the proof, if you like. We want to talk about the outcome that makes your audience or potential client think, I want that. Here's the example. Now my sales calls feel like conversations. I'm not convincing anyone. I'm connecting with the people who are already ready. And they're signing on faster, staying longer, and referring others because they see the value before we even talk price. That's the Epiphany Bridge. And it works because it's not about manipulation. It is about connection. You're not tricking people into buying. You're helping them see what's possible and giving them permission to believe that it is possible for them too. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. Before we put the Epiphany Bridge in place, you're starting with a pretty boring pitch, right? So something like, hey, thanks for jumping on this call. So I help entrepreneurs write and publish books that position them as authorities in their industry. The process takes about 6 months and we handle everything: writing, editing, design, distribution. You'll get a professionally published book, increased credibility, and more visibility. We've worked with over 100 clients and they've seen great results. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in? Can you see what's wrong with this boring pitch approach? And technically, there's nothing wrong with it. It's clear, it's professional, but it's also forgettable. It doesn't create any emotion whatsoever. It doesn't help the person on the other end see themselves in the outcome. So let's switch it up and see if we can go with a story-driven pitch, right? Hey, so I want to tell you a story. I had a client come to me last year. Brilliant founder, 15 years in her industry, but she was still completely invisible. She was losing clients to people with half her experience because they had books, podcasts, media features, and she didn't. She told me, I feel like I'm shouting into the void, Taryn. What do I do? Well, 6 months later, she published her book with us, and within weeks, she was being invited to speak at industry events. A journalist quoted her in an article, and a dream client reached out because they saw her book on LinkedIn. That same client came back to me and said, Taryn, I don't feel like I'm shouting anymore. People are actually listening to me. That is what I help people do. I help you turn your expertise into authority, so you're not just another voice in the noise. You're the one that people listen to. Do you see how this is different? Everything is different. I'm not listing features. I'm not painting a picture. I am letting them see the transformation. I am making that transformation real for them. So here's what I want you to take away from today's episode. Stop trying to convince people to buy from you. It doesn't work. And honestly, it's exhausting. I've been there. Instead, start sharing, start connecting, share stories of transformation, stories of struggle and breakthrough, stories that let your audience see themselves in the outcome. Because here's the thing, your audience doesn't need more information. They need more belief. They need to believe the transformation is possible. They need to believe it's possible for them, and storytelling is how you give them that belief. So here's your action step. Pick one story from your business, a client win, a personal breakthrough, a moment of realization, and practice telling it using the Epiphany Bridge framework. You want your backstory, your wall, your epiphany, your plan, and your result. Then use that story in your next sales call, in your next email, your next social post, and pay attention to what happens, because when you share your story, you don't just grow your brand, you build your legacy. So if you are interested in turning your expertise into authority, if you're ready to stop convincing and start connecting, head over to automaticauthority.com to learn more about how we can work together on creating a book that helps you stand out. Until next time, keep sharing your story, because the world really does need to hear it. Thanks for tuning in to the Taryn Reeve Show. If today's episode lit a fire in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that could transform your business. If you're ready to write the book that positions you as the go-to authority in your industry, visit automaticauthority.com to find out how we can help you make it happen. Until next time, keep owning your story, leading with impact, and building a legacy.